One of the things that's exciting, though, in addition to the big fancy hospital with all the fancy equipment, they've also, are linked up with all these family clinics all throughout the area.
Not just the pomp and circumstances and the lights and the cameras and the fancy dresses.
Pretty fancy way for an 8-year-old to spend their birthday.
We need to invent some fancy new, fusion energy or anything. If we
Fancy law firm, nice salary, big office. My friends were impressed. My family was proud.
But while life in the MLS isn't always fancy, it serves to bring players closer to each other and to their fans. To reform our entire tax code, to get rid of the decades of accumulated loopholes, special interest carve-outs, and other tax expenditures that stack the deck against small business owners and ordinary families who can't afford Washington lobbyists or fancy accountants. Our tax code is more than 10,000 pages long. That's a fancy way of saying it's old and needs to be fixed. 2 of these 5 bridges are rated structurally deficient, which is a fancy way of saying that you can drive on them, but they need repair. They remind us that no matter how much responsibility we have, how fancy our titles, how much power we think we hold, we are imperfect vessels.
And our food wasn't fancy.
They're dressed in these fancy uniforms, and they serve their tour of duty.
Maybe you feel like you escaped, and now you can take your degree and get that fancy job and the nice house and the nice car and never look back. For folks like Michelle and I who didn't come from a fancy background, we lived in Michelle's mom's house. And they weren't particularly fancy or expensive, although later in life she would get some antiques that were extraordinary. But for my mother, batik wasn't about fashion. And they ain't looking for nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. Joked with Malia and Sasha, because Malia's now at the age where she's starting to look at colleges, and I said, these days I hear everybody's looking for fancy gyms and gourmet food and, really spiffy dorms, and